There's a fascinating paradox in human connection that Carl Jung understood deeply. The Swiss psychiatrist spent decades mapping the hidden landscapes of our minds, and in doing so, discovered something profound about attraction. It's not our masks that draw others in. It's what happens when we finally take them off. Think about the relationships in your life right now, the ones that truly matter. They likely share a common thread, a moment when pretenses fell away, when someone revealed not who they were trying to be but who they actually were, with all their complexities and contradictions. This revelation is particularly powerful in romantic dynamics. Men, despite societal expectations of stoicism and strength, are inherently drawn to women who embody something rare in our hyper-curated world: psychological authenticity. But what does that really mean? In Jungian terms, authenticity isn't about brutal honesty or unfiltered expression. It's about integration, the conscious embrace of both light and shadow aspects of oneself. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey toward psychological wholeness. Consider this. How often do you catch yourself tailoring your personality to fit different situations? Perhaps you're more reserved at work, more animated with close friends, more careful around family. We all do this to some extent, but Jung would suggest that these adaptations, while sometimes necessary, create a fragmentation of self that others can subconsciously sense. When someone, regardless of gender, has done the inner work of recognizing and integrating these different aspects of themselves, they emanate a quiet confidence that's magnetic. They're not performing, they're being. And that authenticity creates a psychological space where others feel they can be authentic too. Think about the last time you felt truly seen by someone. Not judged, not evaluated, but deeply understood. There's an unmistakable energy in those moments, a psychological safety zone where defenses naturally lower. For men navigating the complex terrain of modern relationships, this experience is increasingly rare and therefore increasingly valuable. In a woman who has embraced her authentic self, who neither diminishes her strength nor exaggerates her vulnerability, there exists a profound invitation to reciprocal authenticity. This isn't about manipulation or strategy, quite the opposite. It's about the courageous work of self-knowledge. Jung wrote extensively about the persona, the social mask we wear to meet the demands of society. He understood its necessity, but warned against identifying too strongly with it. The persona, he wrote, is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. When a woman has done the work of distinguishing between her persona and her authentic self, something remarkable happens. She becomes, in Jungian language, individuated, not defined by collective expectations, but by her own integrated wholeness. This is what men fall for, not perfection, not accommodation, not an idealized fantasy, but the rare encounter with someone real, someone who has faced her own shadows and emerged not diminished, but expanded by that confrontation. In American culture, with its emphasis on achievement and appearance, this depth of self-knowledge stands out precisely because it runs counter to prevailing narratives. It's a quiet revolution, internal rather than external, and its power lies in its subtlety. So what does this mean practically? It means the most attractive thing isn't a technique or strategy. It's the ongoing work of becoming who you already are, beneath the adaptations and accommodations. It's the courage to know yourself, to integrate your contradictions, and to show up authentically in your relationships. The journey toward authentic connection doesn't follow a straight line. It meanders through territories that Carl Jung mapped, with particular insight, territories many of us would rather avoid. Chief among these is what Jung called the shadow, those disowned parts of ourselves we've learned to suppress, deny, or project onto others. When we talk about what creates profound attraction, we must venture into this more complicated terrain. Because it's not just authenticity in its easiest forms that creates magnetic pull. It's the willingness to acknowledge and integrate the full spectrum of who we are, including the parts that don't fit our idealized self-image. In American culture, we often reduce attraction to visible attributes or conscious compatibility. But Jung understood that much of what draws us to others happens below the surface of awareness, in the dance between conscious intention and unconscious recognition. Consider how often the qualities that most irritate you in others reveal disowned. aspects of yourself. Jung observed this phenomenon repeatedly in his clinical work, the tendency to be triggered precisely by what we've suppressed in ourselves. Everything that irritates us about others, he noted, can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This psychological principle plays out powerfully in attraction. When a woman has done the difficult work of acknowledging her own shadow aspects, her capacity for anger, selfishness, manipulation, or whatever qualities she was taught were unacceptable, something shifts in how she moves through the world and her relationships. She no longer needs to project these disowned qualities onto others. She doesn't unconsciously provoke conflicts that allow her to externalize inner tensions. Instead, having recognized these aspects within herself, she can engage more honestly and completely with others. For men, this integration reads as an unusual emotional maturity. They sense, often without knowing why, that they're in the presence of someone who won't use the relationship as a stage for unexamined psychological dramas. Think about relationships you've witnessed or experienced that seem caught in repetitive conflicts, the same arguments occurring in slightly different forms, the same emotional wounds reopened. Jung would suggest these patterns often reflect unconscious material seeking recognition. When shadow aspects remain unacknowledged, they don't disappear. They emerge sideways through projection, reaction, and unconscious behavior. A woman who has begun the work of shadow integration offers something different. The possibility of relationship not as a battlefield of projections, but as a space for genuine encounter. This creates a profound sense of psychological safety that men, particularly those who have experienced the chaos of unexamined shadow dynamics, find deeply attractive. But let's be clear, shadow work isn't about achieving perfection or eliminating all unconscious material. That's neither possible nor desirable. It's about developing a more honest relationship with ourselves, which in turn allows for more honest relationships with others. In practical terms, this might look like a woman who can say, "I notice I'm feeling jealous right now," instead of creating a scenario to make her partner jealous in return. Or who can acknowledge, "Part of me wants to withdraw to punish you," rather than disappearing emotionally without explanation. Or who can recognize, "I'm projecting old fears onto this situation," instead of acting as if those fears are current reality. This capacity for self-awareness and emotional honesty transforms relationship dynamics. It replaces manipulation with communication, defensive reactions with curious exploration, and power struggles with collaborative understanding. The irony is that none of this is done to attract a partner. Shadow work is fundamentally self-oriented, a commitment to personal wholeness rather than relational strategy. Yet it's precisely this commitment to one's own psychological development that creates the conditions for deeper connection. Jung emphasized that the shadow contains not only our darkest qualities, but also undeveloped positive potential. When we avoid shadow work, we don't just escape our worst, we also miss access to some of our best capacities. For women willing to engage with their shadow aspects, this integration often unlocks new dimensions of creativity, power, and authenticity. There's a particular quality that emerges, a groundedness, a lack of artificial limitation, an ability to move fluidly between different aspects of femininity without becoming trapped in restrictive cultural scripts. Men respond to this integrated wholeness, not just because it's attractive in the conventional sense, but because it calls to something in their own depths. Jung believed that meaningful attractions often involve recognition at the level of the unconscious, one person's integrated self recognizing and resonating with potential wholeness in another. This is why superficial techniques for attraction often create only superficial connections. The magnetic pull we're discussing operates at a deeper psychological level, where authentic selfhood meets authentic selfhood. In American dating culture, with its emphasis on presentation and performance, the woman who has done her shadow work stands apart precisely because she isn't performing. She's engaged in the more compelling project of becoming genuinely herself, contradictions, complexities, and all. This doesn't mean exposing every vulnerability at once or sharing inappropriate emotional content too early. Integration includes discernment about what to reveal and when, but it does mean showing up with an internal coherence that comes from acknowledging, rather than compartmentalizing, the various aspects of who you are. The shadow dance of attraction, then, isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about the ongoing work of psychological integration that allows for genuine presence rather than managed impression. And in that authentic presence lies a magnetic power that strategies and techniques can never replicate. When we delve into the deepest layers of attraction, beyond personality, beyond shadow work, we enter the realm Jung considered most fundamental to human psychology, the realm of archetypes. These universal patterns exist in what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared psychological inheritance that transcends individual experience. Understanding archetypal dynamics reveals why certain connections feel fated, transformative, almost mythic in their intensity. It's in this domain that we discover perhaps the most profound reason men fall deeply for women who embody authentic selfhood, the archetypal resonance that occurs when someone moves beyond persona to express their essential nature. Jung identified numerous archetypes: the mother, the wise old man, the trickster, the hero, but particularly relevant to our exploration are what he termed the anima and animus. The anima represents the feminine aspects within a man's psyche, while the animus represents masculine elements within a woman's unconscious. In traditional Jungian theory, heterosexual attraction involves a complex interplay between these inner archetypes and their outer manifestations. A man projects his anima, his internal feminine image, onto women he encounters. When a woman's authentic expression aligns with positive aspects of his anima, the attraction can feel almost supernaturally compelling. But this is where contemporary understanding diverges somewhat from Jung's original formulation. Today, we recognize that gender exists on a spectrum, and these archetypal energies aren't rigidly assigned by biological sex. Nevertheless, the principle remains valuable. We are drawn to those who embody authentic expressions of archetypes that resonate with undeveloped or unconscious parts of ourselves. This explains why the most powerful attractions often feel like recognition rather than discovery, as if we're encountering someone we've always known, even when meeting for the first time. In Jungian terms, we're recognizing aspects of our own unconscious reflected back to us. For many men in American culture, conditioned to suppress emotional vulnerability and intuitive knowing, the encounter with a woman who embodies these qualities authentically can catalyze profound psychological development. She becomes not just a romantic interest, but a guide to disowned aspects of the self. The key word here is authentically. When a woman consciously performs these qualities as a strategy for attraction, the archetypal magic dissolves. The unconscious isn't fooled by performance. It responds to genuine embodiment, to someone who has done the inner work of integrating these archetypal energies into their conscious personality. Consider the difference between someone playing a role versus someone expressing their essence. The first creates temporary fascination, but ultimately disappointment. The second establishes the foundation for lasting connection. This brings us to another crucial Jungian concept relevant to attraction: individuation. Jung believed that the primary psychological task of the second half of life is becoming more fully ourselves, integrating conscious and unconscious elements into a cohesive whole that expresses our unique essence. A woman actively engaged in her own individuation process emanates a particular quality that transcends conventional attractiveness. There's a sense of purpose and unfolding potential about her that speaks to something deeper than physical or social appeal. She's not fixed or finished, but dynamically evolving, and this evolutionary energy acts as a powerful attractant to men engaged in, or ready to begin, their own development. In practical terms, what does this look like? It might be a woman who has developed enough self-knowledge to distinguish between cultural expectations and her authentic desires, who can hold space for paradox and contradiction rather than reducing herself to simplified categories, who brings conscious awareness to unconscious patterns that once directed her behavior automatically. This level of self-development creates a particular presence, a way of being that communicates without words. I know who I am, I'm comfortable with my complexities, and I'm engaged in becoming more fully myself. This silent communication resonates at the archetypal level, activating corresponding energies in those who encounter it. Jung noted that meaningful relationships often serve as vessels for psychological development. At their best, they create alchemical containers where both people are transformed through the encounter with the other. This is why attractions rooted in archetypal resonance feel so significant. They're not just about companionship or pleasure, but about mutual evolution. For men particularly, There can be a profound recognition when meeting a woman who embodies aspects of what Jung would call the Sophia archetype, the feminine expression of wisdom and integrative knowing. In a culture that has historically devalued feminine wisdom, the encounter with a woman who authentically embodies this quality without apology or diminishment can be transformative. This type of attraction operates beyond the logic of conventional dating advice. It can't be reduced to techniques or strategies because it emerges from who someone is rather than what they do. The one thing that creates this magnetic pull isn't a behavior, but a state of being, the authentic expression of individuated selfhood. Dreams play a particularly important role in this archetypal understanding of attraction. Jung considered dreams the primary avenue through which the unconscious communicates with conscious awareness. Pay attention if your dreams become unusually vivid or meaningful after meeting someone new. The unconscious may be processing archetypal resonances that your conscious mind hasn't fully registered. Similarly, pay attention to synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to connect inner and outer experience. Jung observed that significant relationships often begin amid unusual synchronistic events, as if the meeting is orchestrated by deeper forces than conscious intention. This isn't mysticism, but psychology. Recognition that consciousness is only one dimension of what shapes our attractions and connections. The unconscious mind processes information and recognizes patterns below the threshold of awareness, then communicates these recognitions through emotional responses that can feel mysteriously compelling. American culture, with its emphasis on conscious choice and rational decision-making, often overlooks these deeper dimensions of attraction. Dating advice focuses on observable behaviors and conscious strategies rather than psychological development and authentic embodiment. But Jung's insights remind us that the most powerful attractions operate according to a different logic, the Jung logic of the unconscious and its archetypal patterns. This understanding liberates us from the exhausting performance of attraction. Instead of trying to become what we think others want, we can focus on the more meaningful project of becoming authentically ourselves. The paradox is that this self-focused work creates exactly the conditions for deeper connection with others. For women specifically, this means that the most magnetically attractive quality isn't a technique or strategy, but the ongoing commitment to your own individuation process, the journey towards psychological wholeness that integrates conscious and unconscious aspects into an authentic expression of selfhood. For men, it means developing the capacity to recognize and value this quality, to be drawn not just to physical attributes or social compatibility, but to the transformative potential of connecting with someone engaged in her own authentic becoming. When two people meet from this place of psychological development, something alchemical becomes possible. The relationship becomes not just a source of companionship or pleasure, but a container for mutual growth, what Jung might call a vessel for the individuation of both parties. This is the deepest reason men fall hard for women who embody authentic selfhood. These connections activate archetypal patterns that speak to our innate drive toward wholeness. They offer not just the pleasure of companionship, but the possibility of transformation, the chance to become more fully ourselves through the mirror of authentic relationship. In the end, the most compelling attraction isn't about performing desirability, but about embodying authenticity. It's not about becoming what you think others want, but about the courageous work of becoming who you truly are. In that authenticity lies a magnetic power that superficial strategies can never replicate. The power to connect not just body to body or mind to mind, but soul to soul, in the journey toward wholeness that Jung understood as the deepest purpose of human life.